Hi, and welcome to our HTML Beginner's Guide to HTML. My name is Lawrence, and I'm going to be your instructor for this course. I come to you with many years of web development experience, and in this course, I'm going to be introducing you to HTML, which is at the very core, the very heart of any web project. Websites, they all need HTML, and this is the starting place in order to get online and start creating web pages, websites, and web applications. We're going to need to have a browser in order to get started with the code, because the browser is what interprets the HTML and displays it to the users. You also need an editor. So this number of different editors are available online, as well as you might have one already on your computer. So you're welcome to use that one or use the one that we're going to be using in the course, which is Brackets. There's also some great resources online to write HTML code, covering some of the basic resources where you can go to for additional help and information. I'm always happy to help within the Q&A section of the course to provide additional guidance and information clarification on any of the topics covered in the upcoming lessons. I do also suggest that you try the code out for yourself. Source code is included so that you can try the code out for yourself, see what it does, get comfortable with it, get familiar with it. There's also a handy resource guide that is also included in a PDF format, provide you some additional links and resources, as well as source code so you can try it out following along with the lessons of this course. We're going to be covering all of the basics, what an element is, how it works, and how you too can write HTML code, adding in different attributes, as well as updating and structuring your content in order to produce a final website, which is the project that we're working on throughout the lessons. And upon completing this course, you're going to have the basic knowledge to create your own website. So I know you're excited to get started. So let's dive right in and start writing HTML code, creating some web pages. Hello and welcome. In this lesson, we are going to be covering the basics of setting up and getting ready to write your HTML code. You are going to need a few tools, and one of the tools is going to be a browser. In the course, I am going to be using Chrome as my browser, and more than likely, you're watching this video in a browser, so you've already got that tool on your computer. And if you don't have Chrome, and if you do want to follow along exactly with what I'm using within the course, you can go ahead and download Chrome. So we are going to need a browser because a browser is what allows us to render out the HTML code. So HTML is it's a markup language. It's not a programming language. And basically what it does is it's a language that's used to tell the browser a set of instructions on how to structure the web pages that the visitor is viewing. We are also going to need an editor, so there's a number of free editors online, as well as a number of editors that are directly online, so you don't even need to download them. You could just go to them as long as you've got an internet connection and access the editors online. So I've listed out a few, including CodePen, JSFiddle, and JSBin. And the editor that I'm going to be using in order to write the code is Brackets. It's available at brackets.io. So if we go over to the website, this is an Adobe product. It's free to download. And Brackets is available across Windows, across your Mac. So depending on which operating system you're using and which machine you're using, you could download the appropriate version of Brackets. So I am going to be using that within the course. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of these editors that are out there. You can use any type of text editor as well. So those are commonly used. And also, if you wanted to write the code online, so this is CodePen, available at CodePen.io. So you do need to have an internet connection. And with here, you can simply start writing your code. And you've got different windows for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You can sign up, sign in order to save your content. And then you can see here that as you write your HTML code, it's going to get rendered out in the viewing area down below. And we are going to be looking at H1 tags, of course, later on. There's also a way to change your view. So if you prefer to have your coding on the left-hand side, you can see it being rendered out on the right-hand side. So this is the display area, and then this is where all of your code goes. So HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So these are all the front-end codes that are able to run within your browser. So in addition to CodePen.io, there's also JSFiddle.net and JSBin. So those are another couple resources that you can use in order to write your code online. And they're very similar to CodePen. So I'm not going to open them up, but they are there. And there's a bunch of other ones as well available online. So there are some resources that are going to be some suggested resources to help you along with the course code available at developer.mozilla.org. So this is where the MDN references for HTML are per network. So this is usually a go-to place for a lot of web developers in order to reference coding. So they have different examples as well as information and ways, and showing you different ways to use the code as needed. And really at the end of the day, there are HTML tags that are used very commonly. So there's probably about 12 or 15 of those ones. And then the rest aren't used as often, but it's good to know that they're there in case you do need to use them. So this is a great reference. It's available at the Mozilla Developer Network, so mozilla.org, at developer.mozilla.org. Snapshot of websites, what they looked like in the past. So this is a website. It's called the Wayback Machine, and it allows you to take a look and see what websites looked like in the past. So for instance, the Food Network, you can see what it looked like in 2013, and you can also see what it looked like in 2005. And this is a great way to illustrate the progression of web development, how things have changed, how styling has changed, and how websites have become really more modern. So when you are looking to design websites, it's a good way to get a better perspective on the direction that websites are going in order to also develop better websites, more modern websites. You can use this resource. And of course, with every website, you can always see the source code, and this is directly available within the browser. Click anywhere and press View Page Source, so anywhere on your page, or you could go to the icons here at the top right-hand corner, and you can see the page source here as well. And there's also a developer tools area. So under more tools, you can go to developer tools, and this will give you an overall listing of your HTML that's being used in the page, as well as when you hover over it, you can see that it gets highlighted and lit up information there about the web page. So you can see all of the source code of any web page, because this is all HTML. So it's front-end code, and it's just simply the browser's way of rendering out as the viewable area. And the HTML is always sitting in the back of every single web page. So having a good browser as well as having an editor is really all you need in order to get started creating websites. So now that we've got that out of the way, next we're going to jump into writing some HTML. So go ahead, download the editor, set up your computer, and be ready for the next lesson where we're going to write some HTML code. In this lesson, we are going to be writing some HTML code, but before we do that, let's take a closer look and see what an element is. So an element allows us as the developer of the page to tell the browser what we want to happen with that code. So it provides some structure within our code and our web page. So in this case, we've got the words, this is a paragraph, and that's indicated under content, and this is green. And it's wrapped with the element tags. So we've got a starting tag, which is the paragraph. So this is indicated by a P. And it's got the closing tag, which is indicated by the /P. So that's closing off. So anything that's contained within the middle here is the content. And this is actually what gets output. The tags, as well as the attributes, which we are going to look at near the end of this course, is going to help the browser understand how to display this text. And everything all together is the element. So go ahead and open up brackets, and I'm going to write some code, and then we're going to take a look at it within the browser and see what it looks like. Before we write any of the code, let's take a closer look at one of the websites. So this is located at info.cern.ch, and this is actually one of the first websites created, and there was initially a reason to create HTML code. So if you go on any web page, you can open up the source by right-clicking on the page. And in this case, I am using Chrome, so I can click and open up View Page Source. You can see that there is some basic HTML here. And what the HTML is doing is it's allowing us to create some structure on the page. So we're able to distinguish between different areas of the page. So in this case, we've got an H1. So this is indicating the heading area. And there's also the paragraph. So that was the element that we looked at. And then there's unordered lists, so UL and LI. So this indicates this is a list, and then these are the list items. And then within here, we've got the hyperlinks. So we are going to be looking at all of these different tags in the upcoming lessons, so not to worry. And then as well, there is some additional information. So we've got an HTML tag that opens and closes, and all of the content contained within it, nested within it, is part of the HTML page. And that's the whole general idea of writing HTML code, is where you've got a tag and then you've got something nested within the tag. So we can have an HTML tag and then also additional tags contained within that parent tag, and then so on and so on. So adding additional tags as structure is added into the page. So I'm going to open up the editor, and this is brackets. Now I've just opened up to a folder. I've got nothing in the folder, and I'm going to go ahead and create a brand new page. And then within this page, I'm going to add in a paragraph tag. And within the paragraph tag, I'm going to add some content. And this content is just going to say hello world. And I'll show you what the difference is between if we have the paragraph tag and if we don't have the paragraph tag. So there is going to be a subtle difference. And then this page, what I want you to call it, this file, call it index.html. And the reason we start with index or default is that this is the starting place for the folder. When the server goes to file and it doesn't have a path, it just has the main root folder. So you see this on many websites where we've just got the domain name and then we don't have anything after that. So it needs to have a default starting place, and this is where index and default.html files are used. And also we use the HTML files in order to contain the content, because this is what the browser can read. So go ahead and save this. And once you've saved it, we're going to open that up within the browser. I'm going to minimize and have the editor on the left-hand side, and then open up a preview on the right-hand side, which I'm going to minimize as well. So you can see that in this case, we've got hello world and hello world. But what happens if I duplicate these? So you can see there is some spacing between the top hello world and the second hello world. And that's because of the paragraph tags. So when I save that, the interesting thing that happens here is that the first two actually get some structure, whereas the other two don't have any structure. They're just content that's being output there. And that's why we use HTML tags, in order to create some structure for our content. And this has actually set them up as paragraphs, so it's more readable. Instead of just having hello world all on one line, we've got hello world, which is one paragraph, and then another paragraph, which is hello world as well. Open up your editor, create an index.html file, and create your first tag in HTML and make it a paragraph tag. So open the paragraph tag and then close the paragraph tag. And the only difference is that we do the /p when we're closing it off, and then add some content in the middle of the element so you have something that you can see within the browser. You can also open this up. So I did use the live preview, so this is available in brackets. If you're not using brackets, you can open up to the file location. So my file is located in a folder called HTML, and I've got a file called index.html. What you can do is you can go to wherever the file is located on your computer and open that in the browser, or drag it and drop it just like I did, and you're going to see the results are the same, because the browser does work locally on your system, so you don't actually need an internet connection in order to render out the code. All it needs is that HTML file. Create your index.html file and add a paragraph tag, and you can be ready to move on to the next lesson. We're going to explore a little bit more about what HTML is and how to structure it so that's an actual HTML page. So that's still to come. How did it go? Were you able to create your index.html page? So you're ready to move on to the next part, and that's to structure your HTML page properly. So every HTML page does need to have a certain set of tags. And the first one is going to be the main HTML tag, which is going to wrap all of the content, all of the HTML code. So any of the HTML code for the page should be sitting between the opening and closing HTML tags. So basically it wraps your entire HTML document. And I know without it, it still works, but proper structure, and if you ever come across that question that's asking you what 4 tags every web page should have, that's the HTML, the head, the title, and the body. So next comes the head, and this is the head area, and this isn't typically seen other than the title for the user. And anything within the head section, this is where you add additional instructions used by the browser. So you can have some metadata, you can have some links to your styling, you can also include some styling in there as well as JavaScript. And this is where all of that goes between the head tags, so opening and closing head tags, and the title sits in there as well. So the title is going to be visible within your browser tab, but besides that, it's not going to be actually visible within the page. So within the body of the page, all of the body stuff, anything that you want visible to the user when they go to your web page sits within the body tags. So let's open up our editor and add in all of the HTML tags. And then just at the top here, we've got doc type HTML, and this is indicating what document type the browser can expect. So without it, it's going to just default to whichever one is the most current one. It's going to try to fit all of the code into that. And with that, they're giving us the browser some additional instruction, and it is always a good idea to include this as well as additional cues within the browser so that it can determine exactly what you want. So it's a more complete set of instructions. So also include the doc type, and this is indicating that's a HTML5 document type by typing doc type HTML, and notice that there's also an exclamation mark in front of the doc type. We're going to take the content from the previous lesson, we're going to add it into the HTML structure, and you're going to notice that there's not a whole lot difference other than when we add in the title, the tab here is going to actually have a title that can display instead of the path to the file. And I am going to be using the live preview in brackets. I saved the previous source code to one_index.html, so we can close that, as well as I'm going to close the left-hand side menu. So I've got my HTML code, and let's go ahead and we're going to add in the rest of our doc type. So that's doc type, and this can be upper or lowercase. So doc type HTML, indicating that this is the document type that the browser can expect. Next, we need the HTML. This is the opening and closing HTML tags, and this is where all the content is going to sit inside. So let's simply copy, and we're going to paste our content within here. Next, we needed to have a head, and within the head, this is where the additional instructions are going to go for the browser, including the title, and we'll just call this HTML code. And then just underneath the title, we're going to open up and close off the body, and then this is where all of this content is going to go. So I'm going to take body and I'm going to simply paste it here at the bottom, save it, and now we've got our properly structured HTML page. And when we refresh it, nothing has changed, but you do see that the title up here above within the tab name has also changed to the HTML code. And other than that, the display is exactly the same because we are still passing those same instructions into the browser, where we will have the first two as paragraphs, and then the second two are just regular text on the page. And of course, this still gets displayed: opening, closing, head, body, opening and closing. Go ahead and add that into your project. You can be ready to move on to the next lesson. Just as you see within books, web pages work the same way. You've got some basic structure when you are creating your content in order to distinguish it. So you've got line breaks, paragraphs, which you've already looked at. There's also block quotes, which indent content as a quote. And then commonly used are divs and spans. These allow us to wrap content within an element and then apply additional attributes to those elements, such as the divs and spans. They're a great place to hold different types of content that you can display in different formats using CSS. So they're used commonly within web development and probably some of the most commonly used tags within HTML. And the difference between div and a span: divs are block, the entire line of code. Spans are inline, so they don't have new lines for the content that's contained within them. Let's try these out within the editor, and I've got my hello world, so I'm going to add in some numbers there so we can distinguish between the four of them. H3 and H4, we want to add a line break, so that's indicated with a BR. And notice as well, this isn't opening and closing because there's no content that can be contained within it, and this instruction is just when the browser sees it, it knows that it has to move to the next line. The content that follows moves to the next line. And when you are writing your code, so try to write it nice and neatly and use the white space within the HTML properly so that it's more readable. And you'll notice that even though I've moved it up or down, it actually doesn't matter because I'm using the line break and it's the tags that are providing the instructions on how to display the page content, not how it's being displayed within the HTML file. So that's where the white space can be used as needed when you are writing your code. So we have looked at paragraphs before, and we see that there is some additional formatting with the paragraphs where it adds some spacing around it, and it doesn't have it one on top of the other. There is some spacing between the elements. So block quote. So I'm going to wrap this one with block quote, and we'll move the hello world 4 inside of the block quote and save that. And you can see that with block quote, there's an automatic default indent as part of that element. Now, because of this, we're using the block quote tag. A div, so this one is a div. Put a span inside of the div, and we'll have a couple spans in a row. So we'll have span 1 and span 2. So it keeps it within the same line, but we can utilize the spans in order to apply styling and a whole bunch of really cool things that we're going to be looking at as we progress through the lessons of this course. If you added in another div, it's going to take up that full line of code. So we're going to have div 2, and you're going to see that the div 2 basically creates a new line there, and that div distinguishes from the spans that are before it. Line breaks, previously we had the backslash, but with more modern HTML, the slash is no longer needed. And BR as well as HR are self-closing tags. And what HR does is it allows us to have a horizontal rule. So this works the same way as a BR, except it adds in this horizontal rule. And you don't see a whole lot of this being used, and most of the way that we're outputting the content is controlled with styling, and that's where we create some strategy when we are creating the structure of the HTML code in order to incorporate the styling at a later point. A few that you might not use commonly, but they are available. So this is for underline, and this is just an U, opening U, closing U, and that creates an underline. And we're going to just add that into the span. There's also strike. So this one, again, it's not one that you commonly see, but it is available. So it's good to be aware of these ones, and you probably won't be using them very often. And what this does is this just crosses out the word. Underline adds an underline to the word. And there's also big, and this is going to make it big. So a lot of the tags as well, they have semantic meaning. There's small, which of course is going to do the opposite, so it'll make it small. So you can see the text is big here, it's smaller. There's also for quotes, so this is quoted text, so it automatically adds the double quotes around the content, and this is added via the browser. Also cite, you can see that this is slightly slanted over, so this is used for citing your content. And then lastly, we're going to look at code. So if you're writing some code, it writes it within this type of font style. So it changes the font slightly and makes it smaller, which is to make it more readable so that you can distinguish the various different elements on the page just by updating their different tags and using the tags appropriately to structure the elements. And then we also have nested elements within parents, and we saw that within the span, the div, and within the body, and then ultimately within the HTML tag. And this is how you can create structure within your page by having additional content contained within it, nested within it, and you can go as many levels deep as needed. Open up brackets, try out some of these new tags, and there's a little bit more to come in the next lesson. Hey, are you ready for some more tags? And I've got some more in this lesson. And the good thing about HTML is that you don't actually have to memorize all of the tags, because these tags, it's good to be aware that they are here, but you don't have to worry about memorizing every single one of the tags, and you can use them and apply them within your code as needed. So whatever makes sense at the time, those are the ones that you can apply within your coding, and you can leave out other ones that maybe aren't needed. So going back into our hello world, I'm going to nest in and add in strong. So this is bolded format for the content, moving in the hello into the bolded format. So you see that within the page itself, it gets slightly bolded, so it's a little bit darker, and that's strong text. There's also bold, which is pretty much the same thing. and I'm going to bold the 1. It's actually just putting emphasis on the page itself, on the content itself. And commonly now we're using strong, we're not using the Bs, even though the Bs are a little bit shorter, but they're not as meaningful as the word strong. And that's where the shift has been with HTML, that we're shifting more towards the semantic meaning of the tags, instead of just having these common tags like B as well as I for the italic text. So now it's changed to EM for emphasized text. So let me show you what that is. So we've got EM, and the content within here is going to be slightly slanted. And you can see it's similar to what we saw with the site, where it inclines them to the right slightly. There's also the I tag. So this was again what we were using before we had the EM. So it was providing emphasis, and it was doing the same thing. So that really the bold and the strong look the same, the italic and the emphasized look the same, but you should be using strong and EM because of the semantic meaning of that text. There's also mark. So what mark does is, I'm going to just put mark in here. It highlights the content. So you can see here it's highlighted on the right hand side, any of the content that's contained within mark. So it marks the text so it's more visible. Can also have deleted text, and that any of the text that's contained within there. It's basically strike through. It looks the same, but this is just indicating that it's deleted. And if you do have a choice, and if you are looking for that deleted text, then make sure you use delete instead of strike, because delete is more of the more modern way to do that. There's also insert for inserted text. So if you have inserted content, and this basically underlines it. So this is indicating that it's inserted. And this is also more for editing as well. You can also do subscript. And what subscript does is it places it below the regular script. And there's also subscript. So that places it above the regular, where the regular content line is going to be. So that's subscript. So you can see that's above. This is below. And the more semantic tags are better for SEO, for search engine optimization. So now we've provided quite a few different tags to try out. Make sure you do try them out. And again, you don't have to memorize each and every one. Just remember that they are there if you do need them. And remember, there's always styling, a whole variety of styling that can be applied to them. And this styling can be way more customized using CSS, cascading style sheets. In this lesson, we're going to be covering lists. Lists make content more readable within our HTML code. There's a number of different ways to create lists. First of all, there's an unordered list, which is represented by the tag UL, and then the list items are contained within it. There's the ordered list, which presents a list item number in front of it, and I'm going to show you these as well within this lesson, and they also contain list items. And then there's also definition lists. So we've got definition terms and then definitions. So these are also another type of list, and this is less commonly used within HTML. Most commonly, you're going to find that you've got the unordered lists that are being used within HTML code. A quick example of a simple list is available at info.cern.ch, and as you can see down here where they've got the navigation of the website contained within list. So we've got their navigation browse to the first website using line mode browser simulator, learn about the birth of the web. So there's a lot of really interesting links here. And when we open up our source code, you can see that these are presented in a list order. So it's unordered list, and it's got the first list item. So you don't actually see the tags, but you see what the tags are doing on the page. And as well, on the first website here, you can see when you check out the source contained within here, it's using a definition list. So it's using the DT list format in order to list the items out so that it is separated and a lot easier to read. Opening up our editor, we're going to create some list items. So it starts with the type of list that we're going to creating. So either an unordered list or an ordered list. So in this case, we'll try an unordered list inside of the unordered list. So they're represented with the tag LI. And as you can see, as I'm typing it on the right-hand side, it's already got some formatting. So it's got the formatting where it tabs it in from the rest of the content. And then we've got a bullet point there. Adding in a heading for my list. Let's add a few other list items. So we're going to have our second item that's contained within our list. And then we can also add in a third item And this is the third item contained within the list. So now we've got 3 items in the list, and now it's nice and neatly laid out within the bullet points of the list. And you can also see that it's slightly indented from the rest of the content, and it contains these different bullet points. You can also update the different styles of the bullet points, and this is applying a style to it. So doing the style attribute, you can set list style type, and then within brackets you're going to be presented with a lot of different options here. So you can actually change it into an ordered list, so using the Roman numerals if you wanted to. You can see that that gets now represented in there. And there's a lot of options here that are available when we're selecting the different list items. Default, it's going to be a disk, so update that as needed if you want to make updates to it. So you don't have to include the style tag, because by default it's going to be updating it as a disk item. Next, let's create an ordered list. So that's representing the list with OL. And then the list item format is the same thing inside of here. So just adding in all of these list items, and you can see by default it's using the decimal style where we've got the numbers starting at 1 to 3. You can also update this with attributes. So setting a different start value if you want. We can start it at 5 or whatever number we select within the attribute. There's also different types that you can select. So a number of different types, and you can see that within the drop down of brackets. We've got the numeric style, that's the default with the 1. We can also do it uppercase letter value style. And you can see that there was 6 different possible styles that are available within the types. That also includes the Roman numerals uppercase, and then lowercase alphabetical, and then lowercase Roman numerals. So those are the different styles that are available within the ordered list type. And you can also select these as needed. And then the last type that we wanted to cover is the definition list. So let's indicate that with the DL tag. So that indicates that we're creating a definition list. I'll move this up so we've got some more space to work with. And then within the definition list, we need to set a definition. So this is whatever term we want to use to describe the item. So that's a DT tag. And this is the term number 1. And then just under that, so we've got our definition term. And then this is where we can have our definition items. So that's the DD. And this can be item number 1. And I'm going to copy these out so you can add as many of these DDs as needed, and updating the values to be 1, 2, 3. So you can see that it creates this nice ordered type list. And let's say we had some more items in there. So this is definition term 2, and it presents it in a nice neat format. So it's really easy to read and make sense of what type of content is being presented here, and it's all contained within the DL tags. So open up your editor, try this one out, and also you can play around with the attributes. If you're using brackets, you're going to see the drop-down options for the attributes, and you can make some updates to those as well, updating how your list is presented within your code. In this lesson, we are going to be exploring HTML attributes. Earlier, we did get a quick sneak peek at what attributes can do. And essentially what they do is they allow us to apply additional information to the elements. So this can be things like different styling properties, as well as we saw, we could adjust the behavior. When we had the list items, we could adjust their starting position. So those were customized attributes that were contained within those elements. So typically within elements, you can also add in title. And with hyperlinks, those are the A tags that we are going to be looking at in this lesson. It's going to actually require some attributes, including where the location is that you want to take the user when they click the link. So this is how we can create clickable links using the attribute. And then as well, we have an option to set where the target is. And the search engines do use the link text in order to determine what the target is. So it's always a good idea to include those keywords within the link text to effectively describe where the content is being linked to. When we are linking to content within our page or with other pages, we use the A tag. So this is the anchor tag, and it creates a hyperlink to other websites. And it does require a few attributes, and as well, it's an opening and closing tag, so that creates the entire element, and this is the link to whatever content we want to link to. And as you can see, by itself, there's really nothing happening. It's just a regular element. And it does require to have attributes, which is that additional information that's going to tell the web browser what to do with it. So it does require a hyperlink. And right now, Brackets is suggesting some of the other links, some of the other files that I'm linking to or can potentially link to that are located on the page. So let's go ahead and we're going to link this to itself. So just that index.html and save it. And you can see once I've added in the href attribute, it's actually linking to content. So if I click that, and of course we saw it was linking to itself, so it's going to actually go to the page that's being referenced there. You can also link externally as well. And when you are creating links, so they're going to be all created the same way. So let's say you want to link to Google, and let's refresh. And now we've got a link to Google, or it says link to content. Let's update the inner text of it to say Google. And when we click that, it's going to take our web page to Google. So we might not necessarily want to redirect users from our content to another external web page. And we might want to still include those pages. And that's where we apply a different attribute, and that's target. So this can specify the target window that the link is going to be going out to. And target self is its own browser window, so that's not going to make any change. Parent is if you've got it within an iframe and you want to break out of the frame, so you want to make sure you go to the parent or the top window. And then blank is actually going to create a brand new window, or it's going to create a brand new tab in order to accommodate that link. So now when we go link to Google, we'll just refresh that and link to Google, it's going to open up a brand new tab. And this is a more effective way to link out to other external web pages that you might not want to send your visitors off of your site and send them onto another site. So with hyperlinks, there's different ways that we can create that linking. And the first way is within the relative URL, so it points to the different places depending on where the actual location of the file is. And because this index.html file is located within the same directory, I can just simply, I don't have to have a specific path because it's on that same directory. If I had it contained within a folder, I could do a slash and wherever the folder location was of the file. So location does matter, and if you do have files and if you move them around and if they're no longer have the same relationship to the files that you're linking to, you might lose some of those links, so some of those might break. The best way and the most ideal way to link as well to external pages is use an absolute URL, and this takes into the consideration the fact that this is the full path. This file will always be located here and it's never going to change. You can also set the link for an anchor tag to link within the document itself, and this is just referencing an ID, and the ID is also applied via an attribute. So we're just referencing the ID value, and in this case we're just going to reference one called 1, put it within the quotes. So notice we don't have that path, but we do have the same format for the hyperlink. Go to ID 1. And I'm going to add in a few paragraphs here at the bottom. So I'm going to have a whole bunch of these. And then one of them, way down here, will have an ID of 1. And the reason I'm doing it this way is so that we actually have some content. And when we click the link, it's going to move it to the top of the page. So this is the one that we're after. I'm going to have a 1 there so we can distinguish it. So we see that the content is sitting there within that extra content. It's a little bit hard to see, and if we want to create the navigation within the page, it's really easy to do that adding the anchor, where we just go to the one with the ID of 1. Also, I did mention that adding in a title is a really good port. Although you don't have to, it'll still work the same way, but the title, what this will do is this will give us a little tooltip when we're hovering over the element, and it's also good for SEO purposes. So this will link to page content. Because this one has a title, it's actually going to give me some additional information on what's contained within there. So you see that little pop-up there that shows up. Also, you can add in different titles as well. And refresh it again. So now whenever I hover over, I've got the go to index page. Now I've got link to content. And then also I could add in a title there to go to Google. So let's add that one in as well. So now this one, whenever we hover over it, the title will give us some more additional information that's contained within the page. So try out some of these new tags with the attributes, and always with anchor tag, you do need to have that href attribute because it's expecting that in order to produce the effect that we're looking for by adding in that anchor tag into our HTML. And one thing I did want to note before we conclude this lesson is that we looked at the ID attribute where we added an ID to one of the elements called 1. So with adding in IDs, you can only have one per page. And if you want to add additional IDs to the elements, and each element can only have one ID or should have one ID associated with it within the attributes. So make sure that you do follow that. And if you do want to link out to other parts of the page, then you'd have to create another hyperlink with another link to another element with a different ID value. In the previous lessons, we've been looking at text, and in this lesson, we are going to be looking at images. And you know what the saying is? An image is worth 1,000 words, so we're going to be adding a few images onto our page using the img tag. And this tag is also dependent on an attribute, and the attribute is going to be the source to where the image is located. And typically as well, when you are creating your image tags, you add in the alt, which is a description of what's contained within the image. So this is useful for accessibility as well as for SEO purposes. So there is one mandatory attribute, and that's the source where the image is contained. We are going to be using placeholder.com to get some images off the web. So this is a great resource when you're building out your website and you might not have images handy. You want to add some placeholder images. Well, this is the spot to get those placeholder images. You can set them on different sizes as well as colors and add in text on top of them. In order to get images, we can go over to placeholder.com, and this is where we can create some default images. And as you can see, there's different ways to generate the images. There's a lot of information contained on this site. What we're going to be doing is just using a basic image. It's a basic 150 pic square dummy image, and adding that into our HTML. So opening up the HTML code, let's refresh that code. We've removed out quite a bit of the formatting, and we're going to add the image right here at the top. So that's the img tag, and we do need a source, and the source is going to be where the image is located. So if we want to get an image that's located over here at the placeholder website, then you can go over to there and you can copy one of these links out. And there's a number of different options here. I'm just going to grab one of these by default and paste that in. So this is going to be an image. It's a PNG image, and it's got some colors associated with it. Get rid of the additional placeholder.com content and close this off. And that's going to create our image on the page. So when we go back in and we refresh it, we see we have a 300 by 300 image. About using placeholder.com is that you can adjust the image properties within the URL. So this is only available at placeholder.com. If you have your regular image, you're not able to adjust the dimensions. So keep that in mind. And the reason that I'm able to do this is because I am getting that image live. So I'm going to set this to be 300 by 100 and keep the colors there after the slashes. And add in a line break so that we've got all of our links just below the image. So within the image, adding in alt text. So that's just with the alt attribute. And this is where we can place alt content into the image. And the image, if the image doesn't show up, then it will show the alt text, as well as screen readers will pick up the image information. So I've got an alt tag of dummy image. We can go down and we could see, and then over here, if, for instance, this image, the path was not correct, and we refresh it, you can see that now it writes the alt content there instead of the image when it isn't able to pick up that image. If you want to link out, create an image with a link, all you have to do is create the hyperlink and add the image between the anchor text. So if we want our image to link to Google, we've just added it in here within the hyperlink. And when we refresh it, this is actually now going to link out. So this is our link to Google that we had set up earlier in the earlier lesson with the anchor text. So go ahead, try this one out as well. And if you have images on your computer, you could link to them locally. And in this case, we are linking out to the placeholder.com website. You're welcome to use that as a resource as well. With HTML5, we got the introduction to more semantic element names. And as you can see in this example, instead of just using a bunch of divs and giving them IDs, we've got more meaningful tag names, such as the header. We've got still our div, we've got nav from the navigation, we've got article for main content, a side, if you want to put a side menu here, side section, and then the footer at the bottom. And you can use these in any section or any part of your HTML page when you're designing the structure of your page. So you can have footer a number of times, header a number of times if you have that within a section. So this is all up to the designer and the developer. And these attributes all behave the same way as divs. So they're just more semantic names, but the behavior is the same as divs. And essentially they're container elements that allow us to position and have more meaningful names for the elements. So let's create a web page with a number of different sections in a more structured format using the HTML5 tag names. Opening up the page that we've been working with, just as we saw with head, body, we can use these semantic named elements to provide some additional structure for our web page. And keeping in mind that because you can have multiple headers, when you are trying to apply styling, it's always a good idea to give it an ID or a class so that you can identify the element that you want to apply the styling to. So in this case, let's create one that will be header for the website. So this is our main header sections, header content area, and this is going to be on its own there. And then next, let's create a div. And this div is going to be where our main content is going to go. Give it an ID of main so that we can identify it afterwards. And then within the top main area, this is where we're going to place our navigation bar. So give it a tag of nav. And typically with navs, as we construct navs, they're typically as unordered lists. And then we apply the styling to create the navigation listing for it. So we're going to keep it as an unordered list. And I'm going to get rid of the style because we don't need that style anymore. We've got our first page, and I'm going to give this some more meaning for the page names. So in this case, maybe we will want this one to link out to home. This one can link out to about. And then lastly, we can link out to contact. And because these are linking out, they should actually be hyperlinks. So let's add in the hyperlink anchor text. So linking out to our index.html page. And because I'm creating these as placeholders for later on, I'm going to link out to about and contact, even though I don't have the pages created yet. So we're going to be assuming that we're going to create another page called about.html, and then lastly, one more called contact.html. Don't forget to close off those anchor tags. That's why brackets is turning the list items red, because it's indicating that that hasn't been closed off. So this is the main content area. And usually I like to indent this so that it's a lot easier to read when we are writing the code. So now you can see that we've got more structure. We've got our main headering area. So this is where we've got information that goes in the head of the website. So maybe the company name, company logo, as well as the main content area. And then underneath the main content area, I'm going to add in an area called footer. So this is where our footer content will go. So maybe some contact information, a phone number, and some additional links, giving it an ID of footer so that in case I want to reuse the tag footer, I'm not going to be stuck with just the styling for the bottom footer. I can customize it as needed. Within the main content area, maybe we want to add in underneath the nav. This is where we can have our main article content. So I'm going to create one called article. And this is the main content will go. And then beside the article, using a side. So if we want to have some ads, place ad here. And I'm going to add in the image as well as some content here into the main area. So move this up and add that in over here. I'm going to use the brackets beautify to realign all of my code so it's easier to read. Refresh it. And right now we've got the main structure for a website. And I know it doesn't look like a typical website, so it looks that we've got our navigation, but we do have the structure in place, and we're going to be ready to add styling. And styling is what's really going to make it turn and look like an actual website, that really the website is going to come to life, and we're going to be able to position the elements using the structure that we've created with the semantic elements. So go ahead and add this into your project. Create your index.html page, add the header, a div for the main content, and a footer. And then within the main content, you can add in your navigation. And then below that, an article where all your main content will go. And then a side section where you can place some ads. And you can be ready to move on to the next lesson. This is going to be a quick lesson on adding in comments. So comments are helpful, and they can appear anywhere within your web page document. They're not meant for the web page viewer. They're meant for developers in order to make notes and provide additional information on what the code is doing and what the code is intended to do. And you place comments within your website to reference them later on as you go back to your web page. It's a great way to connect back to what you were doing, what you intended to do with the various web page tags. Comments can be added anywhere in the page. And again, it's for referencing. So it starts with the opening the same way as we do the tags, with the exclamation mark and then 2 dashes. And you can see that brackets now turns this in a grayed out muted format. And this is a comment. You can write whatever you want. And you don't break back into the code until you actually do the 2 dashes and the closing bracket sign. And then this is where the comment will sit. And this comment isn't going to be visible to the web viewer. It's only available within the source code in order to web developers to reference that information. So let's say, for instance, you wanted to add in another link. So link out to products page, and you wanted to do this at a later point, then this is where you could add in a comment to take a look at this and reference that later on. So when you go back into your index.html page and you go through the comments, you can say, oh, I need to add in the link here. And it's really good when you are working with other web developers in order to provide different notes within the code so that both are on the same page when they are creating that content. So try this one out as well within your editor. This lesson, we are going to be doing a quick look at applying styling. And as you can see within the example, the style tags open and close. And then within the style tags, this is where we contain all of our styling information. You can also link out to a CSS file and contain your styling information in that file as well. And this is helpful if you're creating multiple pages that are linking out to the same style sheet. And generally, when you are developing a website, you are going to be sharing a style sheet across multiple pages. So very useful format, and it does the same thing as we've got here within the styling, and I'm going to be showing you how to do that in the upcoming lesson. So now let's take a look at styling. And some of the styling makes a lot of sense here, where we select initially we select the element, and then we select what we want to apply to the styling. And with the newer format with CSS, we've got an option to provide flex CSS properties, which allow us to provide more of a table structured format and really easily create web pages using Flex. Now, Flex does get fairly complex. So there is a great resource at the Mozilla Developer Network.org, and it'll give you some more information quickly on how to start using Flex. So the way Flex works is it allows an item to shrink and grow and contain a certain amount of space on the page itself. So we've got our Flex 1, we've got Flex 2. So this element now has Flex 2. These ones stay 1, 1, and 2 is twice as much as 1. So that's where we're getting that styling. You can also set a fixed width. So in this case, we've got Flex 1, 30 pix. So the first one is a Flex 1, and then it's 30 pix after that. And you can see how the source code is being applied here. There's also 1, 1, 100. So that's keeping that same size and then applying a 100 pix style to those elements. And what it does is it really gives us an option to apply some really nice structure and it does take a little bit of time to get used to and how it works. So there's a ton of examples here, and this is our quick and easy way to create web pages. There's a great resource as well at Flexbox Froggy, and this will get you more familiar with what Flex is and how Flex works. So essentially, we've got our pond, and we've got the ability to center and move items around. We can justify content. And the objective of this is to enter in the flex commands and move the Frogger over to the right-hand side so he's on top of his lily pad. And in this case, what we can do is we can justify the content. So we write in the property and we select flex end, and we see that that effectively moves it over to the right-hand side. And this is how we can move our content and justify the content really easily using Flex with just one line of code. Now that we've seen Flex in action, what it does is it allows us to structure and to lay out our web page really nice and quickly. So there is quite a bit to Flex, and I've only covered just the basics of it so that we can get some structure. And I'm going to wrap up this lesson by covering up more about styling, making selection of the elements, and some more of the basic styling properties that you might be applying on a day-to-day basis on your website. So the first thing that we need to do is add our style tags. And just like other HTML tags, it's opening and closing. And then your styling goes between the two style tags. So we've opened it and closed it, and we've set up the ability to add styling. What we need to do first is make a selection of the element that we want to apply the styling to. And one of the easiest ones to select is the ID, because this means that with the ID as the attribute, we've got a unique name. Selecting that element is really easy because we know this one is going to be given an ID of header, so we know it can be identified as header. This one is main, and in order to select an element by its ID, we use the hash symbol. So that's that number sign there, and then we add in the name that we've given it as the ID. So this will allow us to make a selection of the element. The properties are applied within the rounded brackets, so we can now list out all the different properties that we want to apply to it. So let's say, for instance, we want to do background color, and there are a lot of styling options. And we select a property name, and then we need to apply a value to it. So colors can be used by the CSS names. So if we want deep pink, we can set it at deep pink. You can also use hex colors as well as RGB colors. So I'm going to be sticking to the named color values in this lesson just to keep things simple. So another option, another commonly used one is color. So this is going to apply color to the actual text. And as you can see, it's updating and changing as I'm making the selection. And you can apply as many properties as you want. All of this is going to go into that one element with the hash, the ID of header. We can also update the font size. So that's another one that's commonly used, font size. And then we just need to give a numeric value. So 2em, or you could do a 1.9, whatever em value that you want to apply to it, and it's going to see that it's going to change the size. You could also string multiple ones together. So let's say, for instance, I want the header and the footer. So we can type in footer, and we comma separate them. So now we can see that both of them are getting those same background colors. And again, we did identify it with the ID of footer, and that's how we can apply some of their styling to the elements. Also, let's make a selection. And another one that we want to maybe select is the nav bar. So the nav is unique. You can also select it by its tag name. So if we want to select all the nav elements on the page and apply styling to them, and using our background, let's set the background color to be black, and we'll set the color to be white. And notice that because these are hyperlinks, it's going to actually require us to apply some additional selection there. So we're selecting all of the hyperlinks that are contained within that element. So nav with the hyperlink tag, and then we're going to apply some styling. So we can apply color into here, and we're going to set the color to be white. So that's going to add in that white color. We might also want to add and remove the underline of that hyperlink because these are navigation items. So we might not necessarily want the hyperlink in there. So selecting text decoration, and I'm going to just move down to none. and add in none as the text decoration. So as you can see, quite a bit that you can do with styling. And there's also adding in classes. So classes can be added in as attributes, and they work similar to what we see with IDs, but with classes you can apply the same class to multiple elements. And classes are indicated with a dot. So for instance, if we had our nav and we gave it a class of red, and we want to apply all of these red classes to various elements on the page. So maybe we want to have that within the footer as well. So we have a class of red. And what red does is, in order to indicate a class, we do a dot. And then the same thing where we've got the curly brackets. And then we add our properties. So in this case, I want to add in and update the color to be red. So see that all of those got the color of red applied to it. And I know we've got the ID here, so that's why we didn't really get to apply red to it. So maybe we want to update this class and move it to the A side so that our text actually is red on the page. So quite a bit that you can do, and with using an editor, you can typically start writing the class, the property name, and you're going to get a drop-down option where you can select a different property, and then assigning the value as well. You typically do get a drop-down value, especially if it's a color, and then you can just simply click and add those in as needed. So coming up next, we're going to wrap it up, and we're going to go back to Flex, and we're going to move some of the content around to make this look more like a web page. And then lastly, we're going to link out to our style page. So we're going to bring this to a separate CSS file and link out to it from our page and create the about and contact pages. So a little bit more to go in the next lesson to wrap up this website project. In this lesson, we're going to be wrapping up and completing our web page, our basic website that we've been building throughout the earlier lessons. So first, let's start by creating a brand new file, and we're just going to name this one, call it style.css. And this is where all of the styling is going to go. So you can go ahead and we can copy the styling that we did in the last lesson and just paste it into the CSS file. And we can clean this up as well using the brackets beautify option. And then instead of style, what we're going to do is we're going to link out to the style sheet. So you can get rid of the style tag altogether. And the benefit of doing this is that if you want to use the same styling, which typically you might want to do on a website, if we create the index page, about, and contact, we want them all to look the same, share the same styling. This is the way that we can do that. So linking to external sites, we use the link tag. REL, and REL we're going to specify that we're linking to a style sheet, and the type we're going to specify that this is text CSS, and then using the href that we saw with the hyperlinks, we can select where the file is located, and in this case it's within the same folder. And then as soon as we've got the path in there, the styling gets applied to the page. So now let's wrap up the styling that we were looking at and that we were building earlier, where we're going to apply some of the styling to the header and the footer. So opening up that newly created style sheet, we can keep the background color and the font size that we saw earlier. And in this case, what we want to do, we're going to do text align, so center align the text, and also set a default height for this element. So for the header and the footer, we're going to give it a default height using the 15 VH. So VH is vertical height. So 15 points of vertical height, which is giving us roughly around 15% of the available space. And I also want to select that main area that we had as well. So using the hash main, and this was where we had all of our main content was going. We're going to use this one and set a minimum height of this one. So this is going to be at a minimum, is going to be 70 VH. As you can see, it's already starting to look more like a web page. I'm going to bring the sizing of this down to 100%. Right now I had it at 200%, so it was easier to view. But as you can see now, we've got the 15 at the top, and then the 70 VH, and then the 15 at the bottom. So it's giving us a combined total vertical height of 100%. So now it nice and neatly fits in there. So let's make some more adjustments. So we've set the main tab, the main content area, to minimum height. Also, let's use display flex. And really, display is giving us a way to show us how we want to display the contents that are contained within it. And if we do want to use flex, then we can do display flex on the main container. And this is going to allow us to apply different flex properties to the inner elements that are contained within here. So now we can select article as well. And we only have the one article. So I'm not going to use any ID. I'm just going to use the tag name in order to make a selection of article. Now let's bring flex question. We're going to have flex of 1 for article and make some adjustments. A side can also have a flex of 1. That way they're all going to be the same size, and then we can make adjustments as needed. And before flex, we were spending quite a bit of time, web developers would spend quite a bit of time trying to get and create using tables, and there's a number of different things that web developers have done over time in order to make these adjustments. And as you can see here, now it's all flex 1. So they're all taking roughly around the same size. And then the image itself is forcing the width of that main container area to stay larger. You can also adjust the size of the image. So we can set the image to max width of 100%. So that will make the image resize depending on how much available size is available for the image. So now all of the flex sizes for each one of those elements is the same width. So we might want to make some adjustments. And typically with the main article, we might want to have that as 3 as opposed to both of the sides could be 1 and 1. Maybe the A side, we might even want to make wider, so we want to set that to 2. We want to set that to 4. And Flex has given us a really nice and easy way to make these adjustments on our website. And you see that even as the page size changes, everything scales up proportionately. And when you are designing your website, think of it as a grid format where you've got the structure, and this is where the HTML structure is really important because really essentially you're laying it out so that you can really easily apply that styling to it and make it look and behave in the way that you want it and you intend it to look. So now we've completed our basic web page structure. Let's go back and we're going to wrap this up. So these are all links that are going out. And there's also one other quick styling that I did want to apply. So we've hyperlink. And if we want to apply whenever we're hovering over it to make it look more like a hyperlink, we can change the color of the hyperlink and we'll just put text decoration to underline. So now whenever the user hovers over the hyperlinks, they're more interactive and they look more clickable. Let's also update the list items. So we're grabbing all of the list items, and we can also specify if we wanted to nav list items. And remember that list style that we saw earlier, the list style type. So what you can do is you can remove it from all the list items, and that will remove out those disks there on the right hand side. And then also set the margin to be 0. And we should change this to the parent, which is the unordered list, so UL. The margin and the padding is going to be applied. So padding, and send that to 0. And you can see that now they've moved over to the left hand side. So let's go take a look at our website, and you can see how things are adjusting. Maybe for the A side I want to have a different color so it stands out as well. So update the background color. And then of course there's quite a bit that you can do with styling. So you can really customize it, and there are literally hundreds of different properties to apply. So it's all up to you how you want to lay out your website and how you want it to look, as well as the colors that you want to use. So there's endless different combinations to create your own website. So this is how to create your basic structure of your website. And going back into the index, the HTML page, this is why we apply the different structure in the website. So when you are developing the website, think of it like a grid and build out your content and your elements, position them appropriately as they fall into that grid structure. So we do have the main top, and then we've got our main content area. So this is a grid of 3 different columns where we've got our navigation on the left, we've got the main content in the middle, and then on the right hand side we've got a place to place some ads, and then the footer and the header, they both look the same, but of course with styling you can customize them and make them however you want them to look within your web project. Thanks again for taking the course. All of the source code has been included, and I do suggest that you try the source code out for yourself, get a feel for it, see how it works, and get more comfortable with creating your own web projects. Welcome back. This is the final wrap-up lesson, and we did leave off with our index.html page. So once you've created your basic HTML page that you want to use across your website, so in this case, I've got 3 pages. I've got my home page, about, and contact, and I want them all to look the same. So I'm going to link out to the CSS, and I might want to update that inner content. So this is where I could use my commenting and add in content within the article area. And right now I've just got some placeholder content in there. So ideally, this is where you would update and add content. And also, if you want to have some different ads here on the right-hand side, you could update and add that content in on the right-hand side. The links are going to stay the same. The header and the footer is going to stay the same across pages. And we're linking out to that same style sheet, so all the pages look the same. So once we're ready, and once we've completed what our basic web page looks like, we're ready to create and duplicate the pages. So I'm just simply saving it as about.html. And then this one I'm going to save as contact.html. We already had all of the hyperlinks set up and ready to go. Let's open up all our pages that are available within this main folder. I'm going to refresh the file tree. So we've got contact, we've got index, and we've got about. Let me close that. And so we've got a little bit more space to play with. And all of the content updates are going to go in here. So we'll just go contact details. So this is where we can add in our contact details. Maybe we want to change this to an H2. So that jumps out on the page. Really easy to tell what we're doing here within this area. So go ahead, save that. This is going to be about. So again, going into the article area, and instead of contact details, I'm going to just type about. This one say about us, and save that. So now when I go into the website, and if I click home, there's that original home content. If I click about, it goes to the about us page, and then the contact goes to the contact page. So now we've got a basic website all ready to go, and you can continue to update and customize it and really make it your own. Have some fun with it and enjoy working with HTML.